How's it going, everyone? I am back with another video. This is going to be obviously a different type of video than what I normally make with the off season here, the NFL off season. This is going to be a tier list based on teams' expectations this past season, the 2024 NFL season. So basically, did they meet expectations? They overachieve, underachieve, things like that. I'll be going through each team, placing them in a tier. And again, this is completely based on my opinion. Obviously, this is an opinionated. Tiers are always opinionated. There's really no factual, rankings you can do. But I haven't done this, like beforehand, pre-plan, like what team I'm gonna put in what tier. I'm just gonna kind of freely do it. But I have a feeling like, a couple teams I know what tier I'm putting them in. I have a feeling like hopefully none of them are too controversial, things like that. It's been a bit since I've uploaded. I apologize. I've been pretty busy lately, but back with this video. Hopefully, Dylan and I will be back with podcast episode sometime soon. We're going to try today. I don't think today's going to work out, unfortunately, but hopefully sometime this upcoming week. Anyway, I will dive straight in here. First, and also, I'm going to preface that, and I'll probably mention when I get to these teams that obviously it's different for each team. Each team had a different expectation. Like, for example, the Chiefs obviously had much higher expectations than my team, the Patriots, this season, obviously. Obviously, the Chiefs were expected to, be Super Bowl contenders this year. And obviously, my team, the Patriots, were not. So obviously, it's going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Blanking on the word here, but it's going to be different for each team, pretty much, is what I'm trying to say here. So getting right into things here, the Cardinals. This is kind of a tricky team. Um, I guess I will put the Cardinals in the Met expectations tier. They kind of had a weird year, right? They started off, not so well. Week one, they, were up in Buffalo. They looked good. They ended up blowing that game. Then, week two against the Rams, they were unstoppable. The Kyler to Marvin Harrison Jr. connection was unstoppable, and especially in the first quarter of that game. And then, they very streaky throughout the year. They went on a win streak. They were leading their division pretty late into the season, the NFC West, and they went on a losing streak. They got swept by Seattle. I think they lost both their games twice in 3 weeks. That when they played the Seahawks, so those, that really sucked for them. Uh, even the last two games of the year, they should have beaten the Rams week 8 or week 17. That pass bounced off McBride's hands, got picked off. Then, week 18, they beat the Niners. So very kind of up and down, streaky season. They finished 8-9, at least if I remember right, 8-9. Pretty sure they finished 8-9. Going into the year, I think everyone kind of expected the Cardinals to be, obviously better than they were the year before. But maybe push for a playoff spot. If they make it in, they'll probably get slaughtered in the wild card round. Maybe they'd somehow win a wild card game, but no way they're making it past the divisional round. I think that's kind of what everyone's expectations were for them entering the year. If they don't make the playoffs, just compete for a spot, get close. It's kind of what they did. So I think I'm actually, now that I'm talking about it out loud, I'm pretty satisfied. I think I'm making a solid choice putting the Cardinals in the Met expectations tier here. Also, I had to customize, like, enter all these tier names. It's bugging the shit out of me that like overachieved and underachieved isn't on one line. That is bugging the shit out of me. I tried to fix it, but I could not. So sorry that's bothering you guys too. Falcons, sort of another interesting one, putting them in the underachieved category. Yeah, I mean the Falcons, if the year ended like halfway through, I probably would put them in the Met category, Met expectations category, because going into the year, the Falcons, I think everyone assumed it was between them and the Bucks for winning the division. I gave them the edge over the Bucks. I had them at 10-7, winning the division by one game, and it's kind of what they were on a pace for. It felt like they swept the Bucks, so they had the tiebreaker over them, especially winning both games against the Bucks, and they had a pretty solid record. They were 6-3 at one point, if I remember right, and then Kirk started playing very poorly. Michael Penix got some action late in the year. He actually looked pretty good to me. I know his touchdown interception ratio was bad, but I like two of his picks weren't even on him. Especially one, if I think it was Kyle Pitts, just bobbled it in the end zone. Like Pitts hit him right in the or Penix hit Pitts right in the hands, bobbled it, picked off. I think he had three picks, Michael Penix. I think like two of them really weren't on him. Maybe I'm wrong. I know for a fact at least that Pitts one I was just talking about against the Giants isn't on him. But anyway, I thought Penix played good, but just kind of a streaky year for the Falcons. They started off, for the first couple weeks they were pretty slow. They lost the Steelers week one. That was disappointing. They should have lost to the Eagles week two, but they got that come from behind win when Saquon dropped the pass. Week three, they lost to the Chiefs, close game. Should have beaten the Chiefs, but what a surprise. The Chiefs get a bullshit non-pass interference call to go their way. And then the Falcons ran an outside zone on 4th and inches, basically iced the game in the Chiefs' favor. Then after that, they beat the Saints. They probably should have lost that game. They kind of got a little bit lucky at the end there. The PI call. It was PI from what I remember, but kind of a bit fortunate to draw the flag there in that situation. But so yeah, they were what 2-2, but you can make an argument they should have been 0-4, and they were 2-2, but they weren't. They were 2-2. They got 6-3. They finished the year 8-9. Kirk played bad. They were on a losing streak. Ever since that second Saints game, they lost that game. They struggled from that point on, pretty much. They finished 8-9, didn't make the playoffs. I think at bare minimum, if people didn't expect the Falcons to win the division, then they most certainly had the Bucs doing so, which is obviously what happened. I think at the bare minimum, everyone expected them to at least finish above 500, and they didn't do that. So I'm going to put them in the underachieved tiers, and I feel pretty fair in that ranking. Ravens. Here's a tough one. Okay, I'm going to put the Ravens in Met. And again, this is when it gets kind of a little bit complicated. I don't know if that's the right word, but obviously the Ravens had a better year than the Cardinals. They're in the same tier, but I feel that again, the Ravens had higher expectations going into the year than the Cardinals, and I feel that the Cardinals like just met their expectation. Actually, now that I'm talking about it out loud, okay, I was gonna maybe put the Ravens in underachieve because again, the Ravens going into the year were expected to be Super Bowl contenders. They got out in the divisional round. Again, I actually think they outplayed the Bills in that game. I really think they should have won that game. I think they beat themselves, which is kind of a theme all year. Honestly, you could probably make an argument to put them in the underachieved category or tier, but I'm gonna put them in the Met category or the tier. I'm gonna keep saying those terms, category and tier, when I mean to say the other one. But yeah, Ravens. I mean, they were 0-2 to start the year. Obviously, lost week one against the Chiefs. That's when the Chiefs began the single luckiest season in the history of sports. Isaiah Likely being out of bounds by an inch. Ravens would have gone for two after that. They would have gotten it. Who knows? Week two, they blew it a 10-point lead to the Raiders. The Raiders were obviously terrible this year, and Gardner Minshew was their quarterback then, which that second year in a row, Gardner Minshew went into Baltimore and beat Baltimore. He did it with the Colts the year prior. So, friggin', I guess if the Ravens play Gardner Minshew next year, look out if he's starting. But anyway, they after that they won a couple games in a row, I believe. But they won 5 games in a row after that. They lost to the Browns, and I think they only lost 2 games after that. One of them was the Eagles. What the hell was the other loss to? Oh, the Steelers. I believe they went 12-5 if I'm remembering correctly. So that's obviously a really good record, and all of their losses were extremely close. So that's kind of been a theme of the Ravens sometimes is they blow leads. They didn't really blow many leads this year in the games they lost, at least, really, except to that the Raiders game I was talking about. They had a lead against the Browns. It was just a one-score lead. They were kind of trailing most of that game. Um, but yeah, their defense kind of was struggling, especially to start the year. Then they made some changes, and I believe since it was like week 12, they moved some guys around, changed some things out defensively. They were the number one ranked defense. And my playoff bracket, I had the Ravens winning the Super Bowl because I thought their defense had it figured out. They were the number one defense from week 12 on, something like that, as I just mentioned. Their offense was clicking. I'm like, this is under the radar, kind of feeling the Ravens this year. They manhandled the Steelers in the wild card. It was a bit. The Steelers made a bit of a comeback, made me a bit nervous, but the Ravens ended up, pulling that game in their favor. And then the Bills, I was just talking about, I really do believe they should have won that game. I think they would have beaten the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but who knows? Obviously, it would have helped if Zay Flowers was there for the Bills game in the divisional round. But still, I feel they played well enough to win that game, but they lost. So again, this is when it gets a bit dicey. Ravens were expected to be Super Bowl contenders, and they lost in round 2 of the playoffs. So again, just based off that, you can put them in the underachieved category. But again, they were one of the, I guess, elite teams because they went 12-5, but I feel like better teams because they were kind of inconsistent for a good portion of the year. I'm going to put them in the met expectations category there. Bills. I'm going to put the Bills in overachieved. Going into the year, I think everyone expected the Bills to be good. Most people had them winning the division. Not me. I went bold and had the Jets winning the division. Obviously, I looked like an idiot after the season saying that out loud now because the Jets season was just a complete failure. Spoiler alert, where I'm putting the Jets. But yeah, the Bills, everyone expecting them to be good, but kind of maybe take a step down. Maybe be kind of like a 10, 11-ish win team. I know they won 11 games the year prior, but he gets a lot of close wins, not so many blowouts that they're used to. But make the playoffs, but probably, maybe a divisional round might be their ceiling. Just seems like on paper they maybe got a bit worse. So everyone had, high expectations for the Bills this year, especially their offense. Obviously they lost Diggs to the Texans. Everyone expected their offense maybe take a step down, maybe a little bit. Obviously, that's not happened. The Bills are one of the top offenses in the whole league. Josh Allen won MVP this season. The defense is really solid as usual. And, they were a juggernaut this year. They were competing with the Chiefs for the 1 seed up until the end. And they made it to the AFC Championship game where, again, you can make a strong argument they should have won that game. I think they would have gotten slaughtered by the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I do not think that would have been a good matchup for them. But they probably should have been there still. Should have beaten the Chiefs. But yeah, the Bills, I mean, they had a lot of blowouts. Their offense was lethal this year. Their defense was pretty solid. Yeah, one of the elite teams, made it farther than I think, and just played better than I think most people were expecting them to. So I'm going to put them in the overachieved category. Panthers, they're kind of an interesting one. You can make an argument for fail, but I'm going to put them in the underachieved category here. The first couple weeks of the season, the Panthers looked like, especially the first 2 weeks, they looked like one of the worst teams in the history of the NFL. If they had played like that the whole year, obviously I would have put them in the failed tier here. But they were bad. Andy Dalton came in. They looked good against the Raiders. Dalton was like serviceable for a couple weeks, and then Bryce Young, after he came back from being benched, played some really solid ball and gave the Panthers a lot of optimism. They won, a couple games at the end of the year. They upset the Falcons week 18, spoil their division hopes, even though the Bucs won. So even if the Falcons had won, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But the Bucs nearly lost to the Saints week 18. So the Falcons, if they had won that game, they would have, and the Bucs lost, they would have won the division. So the Panthers spoiled it for them. Again, wouldn't matter anyway, but they did what their part to spoil it for the Falcons. Against the Eagles, Bryce Young looked good. I mean, Bryce Young looked really solid after his benching for the most part. Again, going into the year, I don't think anyone expected the Panthers to be too great. Probably, another rebuild year, probably get a couple wins. maybe pull off an upset or two of a couple close losses. That's kind of how their year went. Um, so actually, now that I'm seeing it out loud, I'm going to put them in the Met expectations tier. And again, it's a bit dicey having them in the same tier as the Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens had a far better year than the Panthers, but again, it comes back to what each team's expectations were. Um, yeah, I'm going to leave the Panthers in the Met expectations category here. The Bears, they're getting put in the underachieved category. Bears. I was very optimistic on the Bears going into the year. A lot of people were. And yeah, I mean, I think everyone can agree that they underachieved this year. When they were 4-2, they were playing, I think, like most people expected them to. A good team, solid defense, offense, figuring some things out a bit after the rough patch to start the year. And then that Hail Mary just derailed their season. They didn't win a single game except that Week 18 game against the Packers after that Hail Mary game. And they were fortunate to win that game, too. The Packers made some mental blunders in that game, from what I remember. I mean, their offensive line was a disaster. Their offense in general was a disaster most of the year. Caleb Williams, I think, kind of underexceeded expectations, although I don't think he played as bad as a lot of people thought he did. I saw some good I like from Caleb Williams. Their defense, again, just after the Hail Mary, when they lost that game, they just collapsed. They completely collapsed. And yeah, everyone expected the Bears to maybe contend for the playoffs, probably at least be, you know, like minimum like a 7-8 win team. But they couldn't do it. They got 5 wins. They went 5-12. They underachieved this year. I think everyone can probably agree on that. Speaking of underachieving, here come the Bengals. Oh boy, Bengals. Now, I went bold and I had the Bengals winning the friggin' Super Bowl for my preseason predictions. Obviously, that did not happen. The Bengals, they went 9-8 and they missed the playoffs. Now, they were 4-8 at one point. They had to win their last 5 games to even have a chance at the playoffs. I mean, they were 4-8. They were record wise at that point one of the worst teams in the league. They were in the top in contention for the number one overall pick at that point. And then they pulled it together, won 5 straight games at the end of the year, gave themselves a shot at the playoffs. Obviously, didn't happen. I would have really liked to have seen them in the playoffs. Yeah, their offense certainly was the problem. Their offense was amazing all year. Their defense was just god awful. It was historically bad. They lost like an NFL record amount of games. They scored over 30 points because their defense was so bad. Oh, Bengals. And pretty much all of their losses, except that Philly loss, were close games. You can make an argument they should have won those games. Actually, both the Ravens games they should have won. That Chiefs game they should have won. Again, they had a bad loss to my team week 1, Patriots, which ended up screwing both of us because if we would have lost the game, we'd have had the first pick and the Bengals would have been in the friggin' playoffs. The Chargers game they should have won. They came back and then they had all the momentum. McPherson missed 2 kicks. They should have won that game. What's another loss they had that they should have won? I guess you can maybe say they got a bit fortunate against the Cowboys. That punt block they got bailed out on. They probably would have lost if that didn't happen. Blanking here. What other team did they lose to? I'm like completely blanking. I'm a bit rusty. I haven't really thought about the NFL and intensively in a bit. Jesus, who the hell else did they lose to? Why am I completely blanking here? Whatever. Anyway, my point is they obviously underachieved. I think everyone at minimum had them making the playoffs, and that didn't happen. Obviously it narrowly did, but they didn't. That's the reality. Yeah, I mean, the Bengals just kind of seemed close to a shoe-in for the playoffs, even though they had all the off-season drama. That I didn't like their vibes going into the year. I think everyone had them in the playoffs pretty much. And if not, narrowly missing out at like 9, 10 wins. And again, they got 9 wins, but they underachieved. I think everyone would agree that they underachieved, which is unfortunate because Joe Burrow, in my opinion, was the best quarterback in football the whole year. Browns, yep, here's an easy one. Putting the Browns in the failed category. I mean, the Browns, oh Jesus. I was optimistic on the Browns going into the year. And again, I mentioned I had a couple bad predictions. I had the Bengals winning the Super Bowl, the Jets winning their division, the AFC. So I had the Browns at 12-5. I had the Ravens winning the division. Or actually, maybe I did have the Browns winning the division. All right, hang on, let me think. I honestly I might have had I think I had the freaking Browns winning the division now that I think about it. And no, I think no. Okay, I think I had them. Jesus. Did I had the Browns winning the division? I either had them winning the division, regardless, I know I had the Browns at 12-5 and in the playoffs. Yeah, the Browns are picking second overall in the draft. They won what, 3 games this year? They were awful. They were terrible the whole year. I mean, Deshaun Watson was god awful the whole year. He got hurt. Their quarterback play was just horrible the whole year, outside of a couple of bright spots from Jameis Winston. Their defense, though, it wasn't as good as the year before, but their defense was solid. Going into the year, I think most people expected the Browns to be, a solid team, like a maybe 9-10-ish win team, contend for a playoff spot. Maybe I was a bit too optimistic on them. But the year prior, they had 4 different starting quarterbacks and they won 11 games. And they made the playoffs. They got slaughtered by the Texans in the wild card round, but still, they made the playoffs with 4 different starting quarterbacks. If you have Deshaun Watson, who, again, I wasn't too optimistic on him going into the year, I don't think many people were, just have him be a game manager. And with the Browns, their solid defense, I think they would be able to pull off like 9-10-ish wins if he's just a game manager. But they were just one of the worst teams in football, just far under exceeded expectations. They were just god awful. Actually, I think they won 4 games, the Browns. I'm not 100%. I'm a little bit rusty with my NFL here. But yeah, they're picking second in the draft for a reason. They far underachieved this year, putting them in the failed category. Cowboys. Here's another team I'm putting in the underachieved. Yeah, the Cowboys. I think most people expected the Cowboys to decline the season. They got worse on paper. Lost Dan Quinn to the Commanders, obviously, and brought in Mike Zimmer. Week 1, their defense looked phenomenal. Then after that, it was a train wreck most of the year, except outside of a couple games. Their offense at Dak was pretty underwhelming. Dak got hurt, and their offense after that Eagles game that Cooper Rush started his first game of the year against the Eagles, outside of that game, it was a disaster. But Cooper Rush and the offense outside of that game, it felt like something clicked, and their offense was better with Cooper Rush than it was with Dak. Now, I'm not saying Cooper Rush is a better quarterback than Dak. Obviously, Dak is far better than Cooper Rush, but something clicked after Dak went down after that Eagles game. But yeah, the Cowboys got hot towards the end of the year. There was talks maybe they're going to push for a playoff spot. Then after that Bengals game, pretty much ended any hope they had a playoff spot. But yeah, going into the year, most people expected the Cowboys to be worse, but probably grind out 9, 10, maybe 11 wins. What did they win? 7 games this year. So they, I think, underachieved. That's a fair assessment of them there. Denver. This is an easy one. Now, you can make an argument, put them in the overachieved. I'm going to maybe be a bit generous. I don't know. I'm going to put them in the home run category, which basically, in other words, just like far over exceeded expectations. The Broncos, to me, I thought were going to be one of the worst teams in the league and be competing for the first overall pick next season. Obviously, that did not happen. The Broncos made the playoffs. They went 10-7. I don't think anyone had the Broncos at 10 wins. Probably even the most optimistic of Denver fans, I don't even think, had them at 10 wins. On paper, the Broncos were not too great going into the year. Bo Nix, kind of a lot of questions on him, a lot of critics. They started off, their offense was god awful to start the year. But they were floating around 500. They started 0-2, won their next 2. They were kind of floating around 500, and they went on a bit of a win streak, went on a losing streak. At the end of the year, then they just swatted the Chiefs week 18 with the Chiefs playing all their backups, possibly to avoid the Bengals because they know they would have lost to them of pure luck. didn't hand them another win against them in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, Bo Nix played really solid this year. Their offense was better and better as the year went on. Their defense was one of the top defenses in the whole league. It was really solid. They won 10 games. Obviously, the playoffs, they got slaughtered by the Bills, but in the wild card round, but no one expected them to be there. They overachieved. They're just going to get better. I'm optimistic on the Broncos going into next season. I'm putting them in the home run category. Lions. Oh, this is a tough one. This is a tough one. Hmm. Oh, Lions. I'm debating where I want to put them here. Where do I want to put the Lions here? Hmm. All right. I'm gonna put the Lions in the God. I'm gonna put them in the Met category. Debating back and forth between the Met and overachieved category. Now, I want to put them in the overachieved. I personally believe the Lions did not have all those injuries on their defense. I think they would have won the Super Bowl this year. Obviously, if that had happened, I probably would have honestly, even if they won the Super Bowl, I might have just put them in overachieved because that was kind of their expectations this season. Not to maybe win it, but at least compete for it. Um, but yeah, the Lions, they only lost 2 games. They went 15-2. They were the 1 seed. Unfortunately, they lost in the divisional round. They were expected to, especially as the year was progressing, the number 1 seed in the NFC, but going into the year, they were kind of expected to at least make the Super Bowl, as I was just talking about. Obviously, they came up short. Again, I think if they did not have all those defensive injuries, I think at bare minimum, they would have made the conference championship game. And I think they would have won the Super Bowl, honestly, if they didn't have all those defensive injuries, which just sucks for them. Poor Lions. Yeah, to start the year, their offense was a bit weird. It wasn't very efficient to what we're used to with the Lions. But then they really figured out they were just blowing everyone out, went on a massive win streak. Um, but yeah, they obviously have a really good team this year, number 1 team in the NFC. They were the Super Bowl favorites for a while. Just the defensive injuries derailed their season. And unfortunately, because they lost in the divisional round, I have to kind of just put them in the Met X category here, Met expectations category tier, whatever you want to call it, here, because they just came up short. They met expectations as being Super Bowl contenders, but they came up a bit short as far as winning it. And as the year went on, our expectations grew higher. And honestly, it wasn't really their fault to me. I don't want to make excuses, but just the amount of injuries they had defensively was just actually, it was hard to believe. The poor luck. Of course, it couldn't happen to a team like the Chiefs that were just mid all year with pure luck, giving them half their wins and the refs giving them bullshit call after bullshit call. A team like that no one can stand for and nothing goes against them the whole year. Versus the Lions, everyone's pulling for. They just get completely derailed with injuries. Poor Lions. I feel really bad for putting them in this category, but kind of have to. Maybe you can make an argument to move them up a tier, but sorry for the Lions. I'm going to have to put them in this category. Packers, I'm going to put them in the Met expectations category. Yeah, I feel like this is a fair one. They won 11 games. They probably should have won at least 12. That Bears game, they really should have won week 18. But they won 11 games, lost in the wild card. I think a lot of people kind of expected the Packers to have this type of season, 10, 11-ish wins, maybe 12 wins. Maybe get to the divisional round, maybe conference championship rounds as your ceiling. Somewhere around there. Obviously, they got close. They actually played the Eagles fairly tight most of the wild card game. Their offense, talking about injuries, I was just talking about injuries with the Lions. Their offense line was all banged up against the Eagles in that game. They were losing receivers left and right. Their defense played a really solid game in that one, but unfortunately they came up short. But yeah, 11 wins. I mean, they had a couple of disappointing losses, like especially the first Lions game they lost. That was a disappointing one because they would have been first in I think they would have been the number 1 seed in NFC if they had won that game. They blew maybe not blew, but they lost to the Lions on Thursday night. They lost that one too. They got swept by the Vikings. So, yeah, and then obviously they lost to the Bears. Then who the hell was the other one lost? Oh, the Eagles. So all of their losses were to good teams outside of the Bears game. And, you can make an argument that they should have won all the games that they lost. Um, Maybe that first Vikings game might be stretching it a bit because they were down 4 scores. They still nearly came back in that game. Um, Nearly came back in that one. I remember that one. But yeah, their defense had a really solid year. Their offense had a solid year, but Jordan Love dealing with injuries kind of had some up and down spots throughout the year. But yeah, 11 wins, losing the wild card. I think that's kind of around where everyone had the Packers. Um, yeah, it wouldn't have surprised me the Packers made a run, maybe even get to the Super Bowl this year. Maybe that was stretching it a bit, maybe going into the playoffs. But I was optimistic on the Packers. Yeah, I had them losing to the Eagles, even though if they had won that game, I would not have been surprised at all if they had made the Super Bowl. Maybe I'm being a bit optimistic there, but I had them losing to the Eagles. They did. I think this is where most people would probably place them. Texans. Oh, this is kind of a weird one. I wish I could like put them like halfway between Met and underachieved, but I'm gonna put them in the Met category. They won 10 regular season games, the same amount as the year prior, but the manner in which they did so was just, at least in their losses, they had some bad losses, like that Ravens loss on Christmas. That was a complete debacle. Their offense was just, after the first couple weeks of the year, it was just kind of, something was off. It was a bit stagnant, just, not stagnant, but something was just off of the Texans' offense the whole year, pretty much, and it got more evidence as the year progressed, especially at the end of the year. So yeah, Stroud had a sophomore slump, didn't play as good as he did the year prior. But again, they won the same amount of games. Like if the 2023 Texans, if I did this 2 years ago, I would have put them in home run season. I don't think anyone had them making the playoffs that year. They did. Not only that, they won a game, and that was the game they swatted the Browns in. Talking about that game a bit when I was talking about the Browns earlier. But yeah, I mean, people had higher expectations to them this season than they did last year. Except, the divisional round, I kind of felt like that was the Texans. Maybe the AFC Championship was kind of their ceiling, one game short. But I mean, yeah, just they had higher expectations this year than last year, and they got to the same exact point. So you can make an argument for they underachieved, but I'll put them in the Met category because I think most people, if you told them the Texans made the divisional round this year and lost, okay, that's kind of where we had them around. So I'll leave them in the Met category here. Colts, I'll put them in the underachieved category. The Colts, I think everyone kind of expected them to be a fringe playoff team. It's kind of what they were. They finished 8-9. I think everyone probably expected them to be an 8 to 10-ish, maybe 11. Maybe that's pushing a bit win team. Yeah, I mean, Richardson was awful this year, played awful. He's now in a QB competition battle with Daniel Jones. Oh boy, what a competition that'll be. At least he had a good game against the Jets. My team, he unfortunately won that game, even though I think they got extremely lucky. I think we outplayed them, and they got extremely lucky to win that game. Particularly the 2-point conversion when Christian Barmore was in a stranglehold, getting yanked down from behind, and there's no penalty on the play. Otherwise, I think he would have stuffed Richardson, and we would have gone on to win the game. But anyway, of course, that's not why I'm putting them here. Yeah, the Colts just kind of streaky, had some win streaks, had some losing streaks. Yeah, that Denver game at the end of the year was a big blow to their playoff hopes, and obviously losing to the Giants, who were just god awful this year. Sorry, Dylan, if you're watching this, although you would probably agree. At the end of the year, week 17 was just terrible, ended their playoff hopes. Yeah, I'll put the Colts in underachieved because I think probably at minimum we expect them to at least get 9 wins with Richardson. We expected Richardson to take a jump from what he was doing his rookie year. Unfortunately, he did not. He played pretty bad this year. Jaguars. This is an interesting one. Um, I'm gonna. Do I put them in underachieved or failed? Hmm. They are an interesting team here. Um, I'm gonna put them in the failed. Maybe that's a bit controversial. Debating back and forth between underachieved and failed, but the Jags. I mean, they kind of not got hopped. They won some games at the end of the year. They finished 5-12, but I mean they were in the top pick contention for a good part of the year. They were had some bad losses. That Bills game week 3 they look horrible, and they started off 0-3. Um, actually, I think they started off 0-4 because I think the week after is when they played the Texans and they nearly won, but Stroud had a clutch game-winning drive in that one. But just a disaster of a year. Their defense was bad, most of it. Trevor Lawrence was bad. He got hurt. Their offense got banged up. Their offense was pretty bad. Doug Peterson at the end of the year got fired. They just had that Lions debacle they had. They had some bad losses. The Jags going into the year, I don't think people were too optimistic on them. I sort of was. I had them at 9 wins. I thought they would be able to rebound from the debacle the year prior when they were 8-3, I believe, one of the best records in the whole league. And then they just lost. They lost every game with the exception of one. They went 9-8. They shut the Panthers out week 17, if I remember that year. And then they lost to the Titans week 18, who were not very good that year, to lose the division. And they came up short of the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, I had the Jags at 9 wins. I think I had them missing the playoffs at 9-8, but maybe I was a bit too optimistic. I don't think anyone had the Jags being as bad as they were. I think people probably had the Jags maybe around like six. Okay, six is low. Maybe like 7-8 wins, coming up short of the playoffs. But I don't think anyone had them at 5 wins. And if I remember, I think they just strung most of those five together at the end of the year. So, uh, do I put them in the under? Really debating back and forth between underachieved and failed. Trevor Lawrence, another thing. Trevor Lawrence, people have been criticizing him, big year for him, and he shit the bed for the most part. So, is he the franchise guy? Some strong concerns now. That debate's growing. Is Liam Cohen the answer? They're kind of in a weird spot right now. Not a great ideal spot you want to be in for the Jags. Um, I'm really debating back and forth between underachieved and failed for the Jaguars here. Um, okay, I'll leave them in the failed category, but I can be easily persuaded to put them in the underachieved category instead. Excuse me for a second. I'll take a sip of water. Oh, I'm going to take another sip now that I see what team's next. My favorite team. Just kidding. The Chiefs. Oh boy. I am going to put the Chiefs in the Met expectations category. By the way, I'll rearrange like the specific order for the tiers. Like for example, like Cardinals, Ravens, Panthers, Lions, Packers, Texans, Chiefs. Isn't going to be my exact order. I don't think, at least for like this specific row. I'll rearrange it at the end of the video. But Chiefs, they're a weird team. They lost the Super Bowl, but they made the Super Bowl. So, am I really going to put them in the met expectations category? Yes, because the Chiefs were expected to win the Super Bowl this year. It's kind of what most people, maybe not win, but at least make the Super Bowl, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, even if they had won the Super Bowl, you would probably have to put them in the met expectation category. Maybe even put them in overachievers because they won 15 regular season games, but they lost the Super Bowl, and this is kind of another logic that I'm thinking of here. Yes, they won 15 games, but if you guys watched any of my prior videos, I fucking hate the Chiefs. I think they had the single luckiest season in the history of sports. I think if you take pure luck and the ref bias away, they would have been like a 10-ish win team. I think pure luck handed them multiple wins. Let's see. I think pure luck gave them the Ravens game, certainly the Bengals game, that Falcons game, that Raiders game, the second one. I think pure luck gave them that one. What's another game? Uh, Texans game, I don't think pure luck did, but they certainly caught some breaks in that one. Tank Dell getting hurt, the absolutely horrendous OPI call or offensive holding call that derailed the Texans drive, led to a Stroud pick shortly after. What's another win that they got from pure luck? Blanking here, I'm blanking here. There's no way that was it. Oh, the Denver game. The block field goal, they made the play, but I think that was lucky. My point is they skinned by the skin of their teeth the entire year, and they won 15 games. If you go into the year, you didn't watch any football, you see the Chiefs went 15-2, you're gonna think, oh, they were a juggernaut, they're blowing teams out left and right. Nope, not the case. They couldn't blow pretty much anyone out. I mean, I think in their wins, their biggest margin of win was against the Browns. I think it was 14 points, if I remember right, 21-7. Even that game, you can make an argument that game should have been closer, but Winston turned it over like 400 times in that game, and some of them were really bad too. But my point is, the Chiefs going in the year, yes, as far as a results standpoint, pure results standpoint, they lost the Super Bowl. They kind of met expectations, at least getting there. But just the manner in which they won, I think everyone expected their offense to maybe get back on gear after it was extremely subpar the year prior. And their offense was literally the definition of mid. It was 16th, literally mid, 16th out of 32, exactly halfway. Their defense declined a bit too. Their defense has carried them for 2 straight years now, but their defense is a bit worse than it was than the year prior. But obviously, an elite defense still. But yeah, I mean, they just got by the skin of their teeth every game. Again, I think they had the single luckiest season in sports history. You take away luck and the ref bias, and you get the Super Bowl. Which, by the way, of course, they get some garbage time points to pad the stats, make it look like Mahomes didn't play one of the worst games a quarterback has played in the history of football. But of course, the Chiefs get, garbage time points, make it more respectable when it was 40-6 with a couple minutes left in the game. That should have been the true final score. Anyway, I just fucking hate the Chiefs so much. Sorry for my rant there. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I'm going to put them in the mid expectations category just as far as pure results and just the way the season played out compared to our expectations. Them being a juggernaut. Again, from pure results, they sort of were, but were they really a juggernaut? I mean, I think they certainly weren't as impressive as some other teams, like the Bills. You can maybe say the Ravens once they figured things out, for example, just getting by narrowly every game. The last play, they're getting something to go their way, things like that. They just couldn't blow anyone out. 15 wins, but not a typical 15-win team. A lot of them were just ugly wins. And they lost in the Super Bowl. They made it, so I guess I'll put them in the mid expectations category. They're kind of a weird team, though. Chargers. Here's here's an easy one for me. I'm putting them in the overachieved category. I was optimistic on the Chargers going into the year. I think a good amount of people were. I had the Chargers at 9-8. I think I just had them missing the playoffs, if I remember right. They won 11 games and they made the playoffs. Obviously, they had a really bad game against the Texans in the wild card, but still 11 wins. They had the number one ranked scoring defense, really solid defense. Their offense, Herbert had a really solid year. It was kind of a bit underwhelming, their offense through parts of it, but they kind of figured things out at the end of the year. They just need to get Herbert, a big time receiver. I thought Metcalf, maybe the Chargers will go get him. Obviously, that didn't happen with the Steelers getting him instead. But yeah, I mean, culture change. Jim Harbaugh does what he does best, go into a team that needs a culture change, change it up, and turn them into a really solid fundamental football team. So Chargers, yeah, I mean, I think most people had them probably around 9, 10 wins, pushing for a playoff, maybe 8 to 10 wins. I feel like most people had the Chargers this year, pushing for the playoffs, competing for a playoff spot. And they kind of met expectations, but just the way they played, just very well coached, impressed me. I'm putting them in the overachieved category here. Rams. Here's an interesting team. What category do I put the Rams in? I I guess I will put the Rams in the met expectations category here. They're kind of a weird team. They really should have beaten the Eagles in the divisional round. I thought they had it at the end of the game, especially after that Puka sideline catch. I'm like, they are about to steal this game. And who knows if they would have beaten the Commanders. I think they probably would have beaten the Commanders. And if they did that, they would have played the Chiefs. And with how awful the Chiefs play, you can make an argument the Rams would have friggin' won the Super Bowl this year. But again, that's a hypothetical what if scenario. I think them and the Commanders probably would have been a close to a coin flip game in the conference championship round, or game rather. But yeah, the Rams, they were kind of streaky the whole year. They started off 1-4. Puka and Cup were hurt. Stafford and the offense weren't playing too great. Their defense was extremely impressive to me for most of the year, outside of a couple bad games, specifically week 2 against the Cardinals. Chris Shula, I was very impressed with him. Yeah, very impressed with him. He did a really good job, especially as the year progressed with that defense. Super young defense, lost Aaron Donald. I figured that would certainly not be the strength of their team. You can make an argument it was. Their defense played extremely well this year and got better and better as the year progressed. Excuse me here. After they started off 1-4, they pretty much, I'm trying to think. What did they finish? They nearly won out. They lost what? 2 games. Yeah, did they lose 1 or 2 games? It's gonna drive me insane. Did they? I gotta look this up. Um, give me 1 second here. I'm pretty sure they went 11-6, but okay, no. Okay, no. I remember now. They went 10-7, so they lost what 3 games after that. Their 1-4 start. Week 18, they had the excuse me here. They had the division clinch, so they played some of their backups, and they still nearly won that game against the Seahawks. Finished 10-7. Just blew the doors off the Vikings in the wild card round. And again, as I was just talking about the Eagles again, they nearly beat the Eagles, who obviously went on to win the Super Bowl. But yeah, when the Rams, they lost to the Eagles in the regular season too. That's another loss they had. But yeah, when the Rams were healthy, they were a force this year. If they can stay healthy next year, I'm going to be very interested. And then they've got Devontae Adams. The Rams are a serious sleeper team next year. I'm going to be interested in them. I definitely think they'll make the playoffs at bare minimum. So yeah, they're a sleeper team, but I think everyone kind of had the Rams making the playoffs, I think, being a solid, probably around a 10-ish, maybe 11-win team, maybe 12 if they would have stayed fully healthy. Probably winning a playoff game, maybe getting to the division round, maybe that's it. So, they, I think, met everyone's expectations. I think everyone kind of expected them to have the year they did for the most part, as far as results at least. Raiders, putting them in the fail category. You can make an argument to put them in the underachieved category. I wouldn't argue against you if you wanted to put them there, but I'll put them in the failed category. I mean, I don't think the Raiders, people expect them to be, like a juggernaut or anything like that, or competing for a playoff spot. But I think people expected the Raiders going into the year to be like anywhere from like a 5 to maybe 7-win team, pull off a couple, a couple upsets. Maybe if things really click, compete for a playoff spot. That defense was pretty solid on paper. The offense is just abysmal all year. Minshew was bad. He got benched. Aiden O'Connell had a couple decent games, but he got benched. They're not benched. He got hurt. I mean, the Raiders were in the conversation for the top pick overall. They kind of pulled things together at the end of the year. They finished 5-12. Now that I'm saying that, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, putting them in the fail category. But I mean, at one point, you can make an argument they were the worst team in football, and I don't think anyone expected them to be in that conversation this year. They're just a complete mess right now. I don't know what the hell the Raiders are doing, getting Geno Smith, who I'm not too high on. I mean, it's certainly an upgrade, but at quarterback, excuse me here, but yeah, just I don't know what the hell the Raiders are doing. I'm just going to lead them in the fail category. Certainly far underachieved expectations this year, I think. Dolphins, I'm going to put them in the underachieved category. Going into the year, I think everyone expected the Dolphins to kind of just have a similar season that they did the year before. Probably win 9, 10, 11-ish games. They won 11 the year prior, get in the playoffs, maybe win a game, then lose in the divisional round, probably at tops. They won 8 games and didn't make the playoffs. Their offense was kind of underwhelming. Their defense actually was like one of the top ranked defenses. A lot of people were shitting on their defense, but their defense is actually pretty solid most of this year, I think, outside of a couple of games, of course. It got better as the year progressed, I think. Their offense health was a big issue, especially Tua. Obviously, you don't have Tua. You're going to probably have a drop off efficiency wise, production wise in your offense. It's exactly what happened. Dolphins were on a losing streak. Tua came back. They were pretty solid. Tua gets hurt again towards the end of the year. They ended up losing, making or only won 8 games, missed the playoffs. Think they underachieved. I definitely think it's a fair category for the Dolphins here. Uh, Vikings are an interesting one. I'm going to put them in the home run category. Obviously, it was an extreme disappointment, the playoffs. It was an extreme disappointment against the Rams. They just completely did not show up for that game. It felt like in the week prior, their last 2 games, the expectations are the highest, and they shit the bed worse and worse in those 2 games. They could have gotten the ones. They simply had to win the game against the Lions. They had the number 1 seed. The Super Bowl runs to Minnesota. They win 2 games. They're in the freaking Super Bowl. Obviously, that didn't happen. However, again, this tier list, I'll say it again, is based off preseason expectations everyone had. The Vikings, I think everyone expected them to be kind of a mediocre team, probably around like 7-ish wins. Pull off a couple upsets, have some close losses, maybe compete for a playoff spot at the end of the year. Just be like a solid but not great, just somewhere in the middle type of team. Probably pick somewhere in the middle draft wise. I don't think anyone had them at 14 wins and competing for the number 1 seed in the NFC up until week 18 against the Lions. Darnold played great this year. Again, well, he had a couple bad games. That Jags game, the Lions game I was just talking about. The defense was really good this year. The offense was good, very well coached. They were a really good team this year. I mean, the only teams they lost to in the regular season were they got swept by the Lions, and then they lost to the Rams. Besides that, they won every game. They went 14-3. I don't think anyone would have expected that. So I'm putting them in the home run category, even though, again, they underachieved in the playoffs. If this was a tier list on, how do I phrase this? I'm not sure how to phrase this. Obviously, if I take that into account, it's like expectations as the year progressed. They probably would have been just an overachieved because they, extremely came up short as their expectations. We had higher expectations as the year progressed than we did going into the year, and they came up short based on our new expectations. That's what I'm trying to say here. But again, just doing this purely off preseason expectations. So Vikings, and they got better this year. They're rolling with McCarthy, which I was very curious as to what they were going to do at quarterback. I thought they should have just went with McCarthy. So they're doing that. I don't want to say biting the bullet, but I guess I'll say biting the bullet. I can't think of anything else. Yeah, good for the Vikings. They got better. Very optimistic on them next year. My team. Oh boy. Where do I put us? I'm going to put us in the met expectations category. And again, let me say, obviously, teams like the Rams, Ravens, Packers, Lions, Chiefs, Texans had much better years than we did. Okay, they all had a much better year than we did. However, my team was not expected to be good this year. We were expected to be in contention for the top pick. That's exactly what happened. I don't think we were worse than what people were expecting us. I don't think we were better than what people were expecting us. We kind of were just as, I don't want to say as advertised, but as we were predicted by most people, I think. I actually think a lot of our losses were purely on coaching. And if we had some, I don't want to say, what's the phrasing for, like, for example, we had Mike Vrabel. If we had just better coaching in some games, I think let's see, the Colts game we would have won. I think the Seahawks game we would have won. The Titans game we would have won. Games like that. So if we win those games, I think you can, even though we wouldn't have been, in the playoffs or anything like that, I think you can put us in overachieved. Even though we wouldn't, have been in the playoffs or anything like that, because we would have been expected to be one of the worst teams, and we finished with a half decent record. 4-13, I think, is what most people had us this year. So that's kind of where I'm leaving us. I am extremely optimistic on the team next year, though. I really like our free agency, especially after we got Diggs now. Really hope we can get Travis Hunter at number 4. Super optimistic about Drake May. Love the Vrabel with Josh McDaniels higher. Terrell Williams higher. I think we are going to compete for a playoff spot next year. Obviously, the picture will be more clear as we get closer to next year, the regular season, after the draft, things like that. But I am extremely optimistic next year. But as far as this list, I'm going to put us in the mid expectations category. Saints. Saints are kind of an interesting team. I'll put the Saints in underachieved, but honestly, you can make an argument to put them in the mid expectations category because they sort of did. I don't think anyone was too optimistic on the Saints this year. I think everyone probably had them around what they finished, probably around like a 5 to 7-ish win team, maybe pull off a couple good upsets, have some ugly losses, not be like the worst team, but be one of the lesser teams. It's kind of what they did. But I think me and most people probably had the Saints at a bit better than they were this year. They started off the year, they looked like the greatest show on turf. They were 2-0. They were more than 40 points in both games. And then after that week 3 game, they just fell apart when they lost the Eagles. Then they won a couple games after that. They went on a bit of a winning streak with Darren Rizzi, but they had some ugly losses. But yeah, I'll put them in the underachieved categories. I think no, I'm going to move them up a little bit. Just going to put them in the Met categories. I think they finished around where most people probably would have had them going into the year. Giants, I'm putting them in the fail category. Sorry, Dylan, if you're watching this, but you probably would agree. The Giants just, oh boy. I mean, they're picking third in the draft for a reason. And I know my team's fourth, and they put us in the Met category. I'm not just hating on the Giants because they robbed us of 2 Super Bowls from 2 of the luckiest catchers in sports history, and the Salmon drop and the West Oak drop, but that's okay. Giants, I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to be great this year, but I think everyone's expectations are much higher than what played out for the Giants. I don't think people expected them to be picking third overall unless they traded up, as far as record-wise at least. They finished with it's the third worst team in football record-wise. Tied for record-wise when you take in, all the tiebreakers you put in for the draft standings. I mean, they were bad. They were bad. Their defense had a couple solid games. Their offense was solid some games, but most of the year they were just a mess. Offense, defense. I'm honestly surprised they didn't fire Brian Daboll. I mean, after they let Daniel Jones go, they were even worse. What did they won one game, if I remember right, after they let Daniel Jones go against the Colts with Drew Lock. That was just a random game. Their offense could not be stopped that game for some reason. Like the Saints week 1 and 2, their offense just could not be stopped for just random. I don't know who the hell knows why. But yeah, the Giants, I think most people expected them to be, I don't know, maybe like a 5, 6, 7-ish win team. but not as bad as they were. I mean, there's just a lot of questions of the Giants franchise moving forward. I mean, is Russell Wilson really the guy? They get a lot of questions. Um, and again, I really do not think they should have benched Daniel Jones. I thought he was, and again, I don't, I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy. I don't think he was playing great, but he was obviously better than what they had the alternatives. And if they were trying to win, he's certainly getting the best chance of doing so. He definitely, I don't think he was playing great, but he wasn't playing god awful. I don't think when they benched him. Um, but yeah, just a lot of questions. Giants, I think, far under exceeded expectations. Okay, maybe I'll move them. I'll keep it in the fail category. But you can make an argument. Maybe Jags, Raiders, Giants, put them in the underachieve. But I think everyone can kind of agree the Browns deserve to be in the fail category here. Jets. Yep, here's another easy one. I think pretty much anyone can agree on, or everyone can agree on. Jets are going in the fail category. I think you can make an argument the Jets had the single most disappointing season in the history of sports. Some people had the Jets that I saw going into the year. They had the Jets competing for the Super Bowl. Now, I think that's a bit of a stretch going into the year. I had the Jets winning the division, as I mentioned earlier. I had them at 12-5. I was extremely optimistic on them. I think I had them losing the divisional round to the Chiefs. But I saw a couple people picking the Jets to make the Super Bowl. Even I saw one person pick them to win the whole thing. I mean, everyone I think was okay. Maybe not everyone. Most people I think were very optimistic on the Jets going into the year. I mean, last year we kept saying their defense is so good, they just need a quarterback and they'll be contenders. Rodgers isn't what he once what he want Jesus isn't what he once was. There we go. That's a tongue twister for me right now. But he's still maybe not an elite quarterback, but he can still be a really solid quarterback. Obviously, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I'm not a big Rodgers guy, but he definitely is in the conversation for, top quarterbacks of all time. Certainly not, I don't think anywhere near the top, but he's in the conversation for, if you do a tier list for all-time quarterbacks, you can put him up there towards the top. Yeah, I mean Rodgers not too long ago, he won back-to-back MVPs, not at that level anymore, but he can still play, I think. The offense, they get Nathaniel Hackett. They built the offense around Rodgers, trying to replicate the Packers offense pretty much. They get Nathaniel Hackett specifically for Rodgers. They get they brought Cobb 2 years ago for Rodgers. They get Allen Lazard for Rodgers. And their offense was extremely underwhelming pretty much the whole year. They fired Saleh. They went 5-12. And I think even if you weren't too optimistic on the Jets, I don't think anyone had them as low as 5 wins. They had some bad losses, some bad blowout losses. Rodgers had some really bad games. Most people, okay, maybe not most, but a lot of people think he's washed, should just retire. Looks like he's going to be the Steelers' starting quarterback, but who the hell knows with that friggin' drama queen at this point, just drawing everything out to be the center of attention. Yeah, fired Saleh after they were 2-3 like that. He was sort of on the hot seat going into the year, but I don't think anyone just came out absolutely nowhere. No one expected him to be fired when they were just 2-3. Especially the defense was balling out too. The offense was the problem. Their defense got worse after Saleh left too, but it was still actually pretty solid, even though it had some bad games. Jeff Ulbricht's a pretty good defensive coach. I mean, they promoted Todd Downing to be their OC. Their offense got a bit better, but still wasn't too great. It's a couple decent games, but the Jets just far under exceeded expectations. I'm easily putting them in the fail category. They just had a miserable year. Just bad year for the Jets. Eagles. I'm gonna take a sip of water here, actually. Eagles. Here's an interesting team. I will put the Eagles in overachieved. I think everyone expected the Eagles to be good this year, but I don't think people expected them to be as good. At least most people didn't expect them to be as good as they were. I had them at 12 wins, but I thought that I believe at least I had them at 12-5, winning the division. But I think I had them losing the divisional round. I forget to who, but I'm pretty sure I had them losing the divisional round. Actually, maybe now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I had them lose. I think I successfully predicted a 2-7 matchup, Eagles Packers. I think I had the Packers upsetting the Eagles for my preseason predictions. Obviously, that the 2-7 matchup I successfully predicted, but obviously the result was the opposite, with the Eagles winning. But going in the year, Eagles, I had them at 12-5, winning the division. But I expected them to, have a couple probably blowout wins, but just kind of the whole year, kind of like the Chiefs, like, okay, they're winning, but something's just not exactly right. I kind of expected them to have that type of season and losing the divisional round. That's kind of the season they were having to start the year. They were 2-2, and then after that, they won out. Besides that Washington game, which they probably should have won, I think the Commanders got a bit fortunate to win that game. The Devontae Smith drop hurts, getting hurt very early on. But yeah, I mean that Devontae Smith drop is wide open. He catches it. It's nearly the game. The Commanders, had their timeouts, could have gotten the ball back. There would have been very little time left. They would have been up 6. The Eagles would have needed just one more first down anyway. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked here. But yeah, the Eagles were a juggernaut after that, and they didn't look too great against the Packers or the Rams, but they won those 2 playoff games. They looked really good against the Commanders, and then obviously they just blew the doors off the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Thank God. Thank you, Eagles. I hate the Eagles. But yeah, they, I think, overachieved. Their offense was better, maybe not from a passing perspective, because they have Saquon, number 1 rushing attack. But Saquon was in the MVP conversation, had a historic season, probably would have broken Dickerson's record against his old team if they had played him week 18. But he was just absolutely electric this season. They had the number 1 ranked defense. Their defense had a complete turnaround. They played a lot better than I think people were expecting them to. And even if you had them, as winning up to 12, they won 14. But even if they had them winning that many games, I don't think many people had them doing it in the fashion they did. And again, I think most people probably going into the year, okay, the Eagles will definitely make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll be making the Super Bowl run. Well, not only did they make a Super Bowl run, they won the Super Bowl. So I'll put them in the overachieved. I think that's a pretty good category for them. Steelers. Here's an interesting one. I'll put the Steelers in the met expectations category. Now they had a complete roller coaster. They started off as one of the best teams in the league. They had one of the elite records in the league, and then they went on a losing streak to end the year. Their defense was pretty solid the entire year, but their offense was not too great most of the year. Kind of what we're used to the Steelers. Really good defense, subpar offense. It was pretty solid with Russ, when he first got into the starting role, which was controversial. Justin Fields is playing solid ball too, but Russ looked better than Fields. When he got inserted into the offense, start at quarterback, and that losing streak, their offense was the problem pretty much. But I mean, going in the year, I think everyone said the Steelers probably. Again, they kind of had 2 seasons pretty much, 2 different seasons. They had the winning streak, they were one of the best teams in the league. Then the losing streak, they were one of the worst teams. You combine it together, they go 10-7, get blown out, and lose in the wild card round. I think most people probably had the Steelers at around maybe 7 to maybe 10 at max wins, which they got 10. Maybe push for the playoffs, probably losing the wild card. That's kind of exactly what happened. I think I had the Steelers at 7 wins, so I guess they sort of overachieved my expectations. I think the general consensus was maybe they'll make the playoffs. They'll finish above 500 like they do every year under Tomlin, or at 500 they somehow tie. And yeah, I think this is a pretty good category for the Steelers. Seahawks. Here's an interesting one. I will put the Seahawks in overachieved. Now, again, they kind of were disappointing to end the year because it looked like They might have the division for a good portion of the year, and they kind of blew it at the end. Uh, that loss to the Rams they had really hurt them later in the year. Obviously, the Rams went on to win the division. Yes, they beat the Rams week 18, but the Rams already had the division clinched. And I was talking about it earlier, and I was talking about the Rams. The Rams played their backups that game. They still should have won, probably. Jimmy G played a really solid game in that one. But the Seahawks, I think going in the year, most people expected them to be kind of a sleeper team, but some people had them as a bad team. Like I had saw some people that had Seahawks as like a 6 win team. I think I had them at like seven, or I want to say 7 or 8 wins. I want to say seven. Maybe I undervalued them a bit, but I had them beating a couple solid teams. They overachieved. I feel this is pretty solid. I feel pretty good with this ranking. Most people, I don't think had them at 10 wins. Probably around seven-ish, maybe 8. Not 10, pushing for the playoffs the last week of the year. And again, a lot of those losses, oh boy, just felt like, how do I describe it here? Felt like games they probably should have won and they didn't. So maybe, and again, they're kind of like the Vikings, where as the year went on, their expectations were higher than what we expected going into the year, and they failed their new expectations. But again, going into the year, I think they overachieved from what their preseason aspirations and expectations were. Niners, here's an easy one. Putting them in underachieved, I don't think there's really too much of an explanation. I don't think this will be controversial at all. The Niners, I think pretty much everyone expected them to take a step back. Some people I saw had them in the Super Bowl again. I think that was a stretch. But I think pretty much most people had them at least in the playoffs. Like I had them in, I think, making the playoffs, but losing, I want to say, in the wild card or division round, one of the two. I think that's where most people had the Niners. They'll make the playoffs this year, but I don't think they'll be competing for a Super Bowl. That's where I had them too, pretty much. They just, and the whole year, just the Super Bowl hangover. Good short explanation for the Niners season. They lost a lot of games they should have won, like that Rams game week 2. What's another one? The Seahawks game. The second one, they should have won that game. They lost it. It's another one I'm blanking on, I feel like. Anyway, had a couple bad losses. They dealt with injuries the whole year. Purdy kind of had a down year, even though I think he played a bit better than people were bashing him for this year. But yeah, I mean, they just far under exceeded expectations. Just injuries, a lot of ugly loss. Maybe not a lot of ugly loss, but a lot of losses they probably should have won. Just some very underwhelming losses. Yeah, I mean, what did they finish? 6-11. I'm pretty sure they finished 6-11. And but yeah, if I remember right, 6-11. I don't think anyone had them at 6-11. Just Super Bowl hangover, injuries, bad losses, close losses they should have won. Yeah, most people had them in the playoffs, at least competing for a playoff spot. They didn't. I feel underachieved is a pretty fair ranking here. Bucks. I'll put the Bucks in the met expectations category. I mean, I think pretty much everyone had the Bucks. I was talking about the Falcons earlier. Either them and the Falcons winning the division. It was probably like a 60-40 split in the Falcons' favor as far as everyone's predictions, if I had to ballpark it there. I mean, I had the Bucks at 9-8. I think everyone expected them to probably be a 9-ish, 10-win team. That's exactly what they were. They won 10 games, right? Not 11. I'm pretty sure. Let me just double check that. I'm pretty sure. Okay, yeah, 10-7. So 10-7, they lost in the wild card. I think pretty much their ceiling, everyone going into the year thought their ceiling would probably be the divisional round. They fell a game short of that, but I think they kind of played similar to how most people expected them to this year. Probably around 9-10 wins, getting the playoffs maybe, probably losing the wild card divisional. So they're in the ballpark for, I think, everyone's expectations. even they dealt with a lot of injuries this year, had some losses that they probably should have won. Uh, but yeah, I mean, they were an interesting team at the end of the year. If they would have beaten the Commanders, who knows? They would have played. Uh, they would have played the Eagles in the division round. I think they would have lost that game, but uh, they beat the Eagles. They slaughtered the Eagles early in the year. And again, that was before the Eagles really figured things out, and they were missing AJ Brown, and I believe they were also missing Devontae Smith that game too. But yeah, that would have been an interesting matchup. I definitely think the Eagles would have won again, but again, don't want to get too off topic here. I think the Bucs met everyone's expectations, so I think this is a pretty fair ranking here. Uh, Titans. Um, I will. I'll put the Titans in underachieved here. Now, again, the Titans technically were the worst team in football. They're picking number one overall, but as far as expectations, they kind of finished around where everyone expected them to, but I think a little less. What are they? 3-14. Most people I think had them at like 5, 6 wins max, so a little bit under exceeded, but I don't think again, they only won 3 games, so it's from that standpoint, it's kind of hard to not put them into the fail category. But you go back to expectations. I think they just a bit under exceeded. Again, 5, 6 wins is kind of I think the unanimous somewhere around there amount of wins to the Titans. Fell below that a little bit. They just had some bad losses. There was like even though they were the worst team in football, they didn't feel like it through parts of the year. Their defense was solid most of the year. Their offense had a couple decent games, but had a lot of bad losses too. They're picking number one for a reason. Yes, they only won 3 games, but I'm gonna put them in underachieved because again, it's about expectations going into the year. Commanders, here's an easy one. Putting them in the home run category. I mean, there were some people optimistic on the Commanders going into the year. Some people, like, even though I can't stand him, Nick Wright had them winning the division. Obviously, that didn't happen, but he wasn't too far off on them. They went 12-5, and they made the playoffs. They not only did they make the playoffs, they won the get in the wild card against Tampa. They upset the Lions, the number one seed. Which again, I was talking about the Lions. I think the Lions really would have won the Super Bowl if their defense didn't get as banged up as it did. But again, the Commanders pulled off the win there. Uh, Obviously, they came up short against the Eagles in the conference championship, but they far overexceeded, I think, everyone's expectations. I mean, people were more optimistic on them than the Broncos, at least from what I saw, and at least I was too personally. But I didn't have the Commanders having a great year. I think I had them at like, I think I had the reverse record. I think I had them at like 5-12. Um, you know, people had them around there. Some people had them around like 7, 6, 7-ish wins. A couple people had them pushing for a playoff spot, but most people didn't. Even if you had them making the playoffs, I don't think anyone had them making the conference championship game. For 12-5, one of the best records in the league, coming up 1 win short of making the Super Bowl, winning the NFC, the conference. Jane Daniels having the year he did, all the thrilling wins they got the last second. I don't think anyone expected the year they had. So this is an easy one to me. I'm putting them in the home run category here. Let's see, do some reorganizing here. Yeah, I think okay, I'll put the Commanders had the best home run season, then Broncos, then Vikings. Yeah, that's good to me. Overachieved category here. I'll put the Eagles at one. Okay, so yeah, that's good. My met expectations category. Let's see. Um, uh, okay, this is all the teams here. This is kind of tough. Um, okay, I guess I'll put the Chiefs at one because I think again not putting the Chiefs at one. I was gonna say from a results standpoint, but I'm kind of factoring more into that than pure results. All these teams are kind of close, I think. Yeah, I'll put the Lions at one, put the Ravens at two. Um, Packers at 3. And again, this is just based off this isn't based off what team was better than each other, it's just based off preseason expectations and how they met them, I think. Um Packers at 3. God, there's a lot of teams in this tier, Jesus. Um hmm, this is a hard one here. Okay, Panthers definitely going to the bottom. I'll move them out of the way. Um Jesus, this is hard for me. Uh okay, Lions, Ravens, Packers. Jesus. Okay, I'll put the Chiefs next. Uh, Rams in front of here. Um, Steelers here. Put the Bucks in front of them. Okay, I'll put the Bucks in front of okay, I think this is a decent list as far as met expectations. And again, differentiating. Like for example, I think like my team as far as expectations, I think this is good because we again expectations we probably went around. Actually, do you know what? I'm gonna put my team. Like for example, I think my team is the perfect. Let's put us top in the my expectations tier because we were expected to win probably around 4 or 5 ish games. We won 4. We played, I think, exactly how pretty much everyone expected us to. I think we met expectations pretty much dead on. So I'll put us there. Uh, See, the Lions, even though from a results standpoint, you can argue they go into go on and underachieved, they really were a juggernaut. And again, they just got upset in the playoffs. I don't want to just judge everything off one loss in the playoffs where they had all those injuries. I'll leave them there. Um, uh, actually, um, okay, that's fair to me, I think. Uh, it's kind of just an iffy criteria. I'm going back and forth and questioning myself here as I'm moving teams here. Let's see. Like for example, Packers, Chiefs. I'm distinguishing between them because the Packers kind of met expectations very dead on too. 11 wins, losing the wild card. I think most people had them around that. Chiefs lost in the Super Bowl, met expectations, but as far as how they looked throughout the year, not again, they won 15 games that were not pretty. Everyone expected them to be a lot more convincing than they were, I think. Um, okay, fuck it. I'll say this is good enough. I underachieved. Actually, I'm gonna move the Bengals to the top underachieved. I think they underachieved the most. Th- hmm, then I'll put the Bears in front of the Falcons because at least the Falcons almost won the division. The Bears were just far under exceeding expectations. You know what? I'm gonna put the Bears in the front. Yeah, I'm gonna put the Bears in front of the Bengals because at least the Bengals finished above 500, almost made the playoffs. The Bears were just nowhere near competing for a playoff spot like we all expected them to, or at least most people expected them to. Um, put the Cowboys in front of the Colts. I think the Dolphins in front of the Colts rather. I think the Dolphins underexceeded more than the Colts did. Uh, Actually, I'm going to put the Niners in front of both of them. Um, Actually, I'll put the Niners in front of the Cowboys too. There we go. Okay, mm, that's pretty solid, I think. Failed. I'm honestly putting the Jets. I think the Jets had the biggest failure based off preseason expectations. Um, let's see. Then the Browns are at 2. That's solid, I think. Um, okay, I think this is a pretty solid list. Actually, Jags, Raiders, they're kind of interchangeable, I think. Um, these two teams faced off at the end of the year. What an awful game that was. Jags really should have won that game. The Raiders ended up winning it. Um, Actually, do you know what? Okay, I'm gonna put the Giants in front of both teams. I think the Giants season was more of a failure than the Jags and the Raiders. It's basically, in other words, I think the Raiders and these five teams, I think the Raiders had the the how do I phrase this? The least failed season based off preseason expectations. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm even kind of confusing myself here. Hopefully it makes sense. Okay, I think this list is pretty solid. If I really think about it, I'd probably swap some of these teams around, but whatever. Um, actually, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do now. Cardinals, you're getting moved down a bit. I think the Bucks met expectations a bit better than the Cardinals. Um, eh, Steelers, Cardinals, kind of interchangeable for me on this year. Whatever. Um, okay. Uh, actually, do you know what? I'm gonna move the Niners up. Um, Jesus, do you know what? I'm gonna move the Niners up in front of the Bengals too. 'Cause then again, the Bengals at least almost made the playoffs. The Niners were nowhere near the playoffs. Um, Bears, Niners, Bengals, Falcons, Dolphins. Okay, yep, I'm good with my underachieve. All right, met expectations. Let's see. Let me go over it again here. Um, okay, I'll leave it. Do you know what? Mm, Panthers, Saints. So they're kind of interchangeable for me too here. Um, which team met expectations more, Panthers or Saints? They're kind of interchangeable. Make an argument either way, I think. I'll say, oh boy, let me think about this here. It's the Panthers. Again, kind of a tale of two halves, even though they didn't finish with a great record. They played a lot better at the back half of the year. Saints. Oh boy. Which team do I think met expectations more? Jesus. I mean, these were two bad teams. I don't know why I'm friggin' wasn't this many brain cells trying to think about this so much. Okay, I will put Jesus. Uh, Fuck it. I'll just put this Panthers in front of the Saints. Why not? Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay, I'll put the oh God, I don't know. Now I don't know. Panthers. Maybe you can. Fuck it. I'll just leave it like that. Oh God, do I want to leave it like that? God, I'm such an indecisive person. Uh, eh, fuck it. I'll leave it like that. All right. Anyway, I will end the video here. Different kind of video, obviously. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you don't bash me too much. Think I'm too much of an idiot for these rankings. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Be on the lookout for probably the podcast episode dropping soon. I have some more video plans planned shortly, so be on the lookout for that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Have a good one. Take it easy, guys.